So I'm going to actually get my chat section up because it's not even over there. Okay, I see you don't have a camera. That's fine. If you want to, say anything, Sister Sarah, you can. You could just write it in the chat. I have the chat section right here, or you can unmute yourself. So, all right. So today we're going to be looking at spiritual fruit, spiritual elevation. That's our topic today. And it is really, it's a continuation from our sowing season lesson. Oh, wow. I don't like that. What just happened with that? Why is it? Okay. I don't actually understand why it's doing that. Okay. Hold on just another moment. See, this is why I shouldn't do things like at the last minute, right? Let me see here. I'm gonna try it one more time. I want desktop 2. Okay. Maybe I don't have a choice but to have that there. See, that's why I shouldn't just do things at the last minute. Because now I don't see. Hold on, let me try one more time. I'm going to just try to share Safari. See what happens when I do that way. Okay, that's what I want. I want to see that. Okay, I was just going the wrong way. Okay, I got it now, y'all. See, I got it. It just took me a little bit of time to figure it out.
Praise y'all.
I know. All right, let's just act like that never happened. All right, let's just act like it didn't transpire that way. All right, so what we're going to look at today is spiritual fruit, spiritual elevation. And as I was saying, this is a continuation of sowing season from last time. We didn't get through the last scriptures from sowing season. So that's why we're kind of looping back around, and we're going to finish the sowing season lesson because it's still sowing season. If anyone doesn't know, it's still sowing season, probably up through the middle towards the end of December. And it also kind of goes into the what are we striving for lesson from a couple of months ago as well, where we're trying to figure out what's worth striving for, so that while we're striving, we don't put our hand in that proverbial basket and then pull it out. And when we look in our hand, we find that we was actually grasping after vapor. We was grasping after air, something that didn't even really exist. So it kind of goes into both of those lessons that we had. So if I can get someone to tell me either on the audio or in the chat that you can see Luke chapter 13 verses 6 through 9 on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're in business. We're doing good so far. So the first verse that we're going to start in here is Luke chapter 13 verses 6 through 9, which says, and he told this parable a man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, look, for 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should it use up the ground? And he answered him, this is the vine dresser, sir, let it alone this year also until I dig around it and put on manure. Then, if it should bear fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down. So this is going to be one of our main verses here that we're looking at today. And so when we look at our walk, of course, when Yeshua is talking in parables, he's talking about physical things that people could identify with. But on a spiritual level, which is the level he was trying to get to, if we just look at what he said on a purely physical level, then it's kind of like we're just, we're reading the scriptures without understanding, right? When we look at the scriptures from the light of this is a spiritual lesson that he's presenting using a physical example, we're going to look at ourselves, right? So when we look at our walk in Yeshua, most of us start off strong. Maybe I'm making an overgeneralization. Maybe some of us start off a little weak and then we get stronger and stronger and stronger. But for the most part, I believe that when we come to him, most of us have a strong desire for his deliverance. We have a strong desire for his salvation. We have a strong desire to be rescued from sin, from, the clutches of this world. And some of us, our carnal minds are driving us crazy. We just need deliverance from our carnality or carnal minds. And so we want to escape from this bondage to sin and serve the Most High. And the ultimate result of that escape is to receive his salvation, to receive his acceptance, to receive his face, for his face to shine upon us, to receive the benefits that come with serving him, right? We want to be on his side. And most importantly, we want him to be on our side. So we agree with him that he's right. That's part of this whole process of justification. It's like if you're in a courtroom, we have the Messiah as our mediator. And so we agree with the Most High that his ways are right and true, and that in our carnality, we've been in transgression. And so we want to be made right. We want to be justified. We want to be on his side, right? And we want him to be on our side. So when we look at that whole process, that's a one word name for that would be the gospel, the gospel message, which is this thing that we want, this thing that we desire. And so that's the thing that is going to be planted, in us, right? But just because this seed is planted in us doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to remain in us and grow into the plant that it's intended to be. Okay, so we're going to look at this parable here from that perspective of this seed that's being planted in us, that the Most High, when he comes and he looks at us, or when we are praying to him and we're looking at ourselves, or when someone else is examining and looking at our lives, even, that they're able to see this fruit that is coming forth from us. Okay, so let's go to Matthew chapter 13, verses 1-9, where it says, that same day Yeshua went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down. and the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. He who has an ear, let him hear. So when we're looking at this parable, which is about actually sowing the seed, we can see that there's different types of ground. So we could first start off with what is the seed, okay? Because, this is something that I kind of alluded to before, but this is making a direct, Yeshua is giving a direct interpretation of what that seed is. So it says, and he sowed, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Now, when we look at Luke chapter 8, verse 11, because this parable is given in Luke and in Matthew, we can see here that the seed is the word of Elohim. And so what I was speaking about was the gospel, being this message of salvation. And what is that message of salvation? That's the message of the Messiah, whose name actually means salvation, Yeshua, right? John 1 verse 14 says, and the word became flesh and dwelt among us. So when Yeshua is saying that the seed is the word of Elohim, we have understanding that this seed is him, and it's the message. Also it's the message of Messiah, this message of hope that we have in him. And it's also, when you think about the indwelling of Messiah within us, you automatically think about how that Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, is going to dwell in us. And so when we talk about the Ruach HaKodesh, that is the spirit of holiness. So that is the Most High's Holy Spirit, the spirit of holiness dwelling on the inside of us, okay? And so that is the seed. So when we look at this parable, there's 4 different types of ground. And I hope that if anyone has anything to say, you're able to unmute yourself and say it, because I don't want it to just be me talking the whole time. But if you have anything you'd like to add, you could definitely put it in the chat. You could definitely speak up. All right, so let's look at ground 1. Okay, first type of ground. And as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. So what does this mean? In some of the parables, Yeshua doesn't actually explain what the parable means, but in this parable, he explains exactly what he's saying. So it's not subject to any interpretation, because he literally gives the interpretation. And since it's written in Matthew and in Luke, we can see two different perspectives or 2 different wordings of his interpretation for what he meant by this. So Matthew 13 verse 19 says, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. And Luke 8 verse 12 says, the ones along the path are the ones who have heard. Then the devil comes and takes away the word from their hearts, so that they may not believe and be saved. So when we see here these seeds that fall along the path, they don't, this is the person who never got it, who never got it. I'll put got it in quotes, right? They never got it. They didn't receive the word at all, right? It just stayed up on the surface level. In fact, they didn't get it so much so that birds are coming along and just taking it away and eating it, right? Um, it's not something that is implanted in them, right? So that's a person who hears the word, who hears this seed, and they can't understand it. They don't receive it, right? They may want to hold on to the things of this world, or to their carnal minds, or to the things that they like, that stand in opposition to the Most High. So they hear the word, and instead of receiving it, go ahead, shut that door. Instead of receiving it, they buck up against it. Okay, in other words, they reject the word, right? It's like if you was about to swallow something, you just spit it back out, right? Or maybe they don't totally just spit it out, but they say, okay, I'm going to table it, and I'm going to think about it at a future date. And I know a lot of people who fall into this category of putting off the Most High and his ways to some future date, post dating the check, so to speak. Okay, with this pride of, I can post date what the Most High has for me. I could post date this seed. I could say, well, I don't want to receive the seed right now, but I'll receive it when I'm done with college, or I'll receive it, when I'm done having a good time. I'll receive it when I'm old and gray, right? And I'm not able to do the things I want to do. That means that the word isn't real to you. If you can post date, if you could say, and you don't even know if you're guaranteed that future time, but I'm going to put this thing off, then that means that it's not real to you. It's almost like if somebody gave you $1 million check and you say, well, I'm just going to wait a couple years before I deposit it, right? It's not something that they want to receive, so they don't. And it's not about the seed being bad. The seed isn't bad. There's birds that's going to come and eat it. You know what I mean? The seed isn't bad, but the ground isn't ready. The ground can't receive it. Sometimes I think we talked about this when we was talking about sowing season, how when ground is so dry, sometimes if you pour water on it, the water just rolls off. If there's like a famine, and the ground gets really, really dry and cracked, sometimes the water has to sit on top of it for some time before it can even seep down on the inside. You could literally have floods after a long dry span, because the ground can't even receive the water. So sometimes the heart of people is so hardened that they can't receive the word of Yah. And so that seed just kind of sits on the top, and it never gets implanted. It never goes on the inside. Okay, so when we talk about the second type of ground, Yeshua said, other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched. And since they had no root, they withered away. So when we look at Matthew chapter 13, verses 20 to 21, it says, as for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while. And when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. Okay, in Luke 8, verse 13, it says, and the ones on the rock are those who, when they hear the word, receive it with joy. But these have no root. They believe for a while, and in time of testing, they fall away. So this is the person who hears the word and receives it. The person who hears the word and receives it, okay? But they don't experience a full conversion, they aren't totally sold out. They aren't totally rooted in Yah. These are the people who pass through. You know, they're here for a time, but when the sun hits, you know, when trouble comes, when adversity comes, when a testing of their resolve to be servants of the Most High comes, um, the plant withers in them, right? Because it didn't take root in them. It's not able to hold to their ground. It's not able to hold to their heart, right? And because it's not able to hold to their heart, it's not able to grow. It's not able to grow. So let me see here. Nitsa said the ground is not ready because maybe we're sowing out of season, planting summer food in the winter and winter food during the fall. And that is also the case, that when, you know, we always talk about the sower being one who's throwing seed. Okay, he's throwing the seed, and he's not necessarily even looking at the ground, right? He's throwing the seed, and the seed is falling in different types of ground. So sometimes someone might even come across you or come across a message or come across something, and maybe that seed at that time is not going to take root, right? But when their ground is ready, then that seed can take the root, right? So it's, the seed is good at all times, but sometimes the ground is the thing that's the issue, which is what we're talking about here. Okay, so the second type of ground, it's someone who gets excited about this message, this gospel, this salvation, this Yeshua, and they get so excited, and you know, they grow up really quick, right? But then as soon as testing comes, as soon as problems come, as soon as anything happens, because they don't have a root, because they aren't, that seed in that word isn't rooted in their soil, it's something that doesn't grow. Okay, and actually it withers up and it dies. So does anyone have anything they want to say about that? Because I kind of heard a little. Okay, I guess not. All right, so let's go and talk about the third type of ground. It says, and other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. The thorns grew up and choked them. So let's look here. Matthew chapter 13, verse 22. It says, as for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. Okay. Luke 8, verse 14 says, and as for what fell among the thorns, they are those who hear, but as they go on their way, they are choked by the cares and riches and pleasures of life, and their fruit does not mature. Their fruit does not mature. So, you know, now we're going to get into talking about those that are sown, that seed is sown amongst thorns. Okay. Now, this is the person in whom the seed is planted, and it really might take root. You know, that seed, I don't know, I kind of hear a little bit of feedback. But that seed really might take root in them. It really might penetrate their heart. And it really might grow. Okay. But what happens is that the ground has these other things that's growing in it as well. Okay. The ground has these other things that shouldn't be there, right? The ground is sharing a crop. Okay. Now, one of the things that I've learned through my husband planting, because I don't garden, I just kind of glean off of what he does, because I don't know anything about gardening. But when you plant things, first of all, if you have weeds in the ground, it takes up the nutrients that should go to your crop, right? It takes up the nutrients in the soil. It takes up the water that's going to your crop. So you don't want to have weeds and thorns and things when you have a garden. The first thing that you should do, actually, before you even plant your seeds, is to pull up all those weeds. Pull the weeds up. And then after you pull the weeds up, then plant your seeds. Okay.
So would the weeds be considered stuff like stress, old issues that you haven't dealt with, um, just like ills of life, things you go
Yeah.
through every day, and not allowing the Most High to work on those things within you.
Yes,
Okay.
totally. I thank you, because that's actually where we're going to with it. I'm so happy you said that.
Yeah,
And
because I've been there. Like I think this parable for me, I relate to it the most because I've been um, the different versions of the ground or soil throughout my spiritual journey.
yeah,
So I definitely can relate um, to this parable. Like I really feel like it touched me when it was supposed to today.
I mean, and that's where I was trying to get to, that just because you might be dealing with someone who might be that first type of ground today, and give it a couple years, you know what I mean, they could literally be good ground. We shouldn't give up on people just because they didn't receive that seed when we thought they should.
Exactly.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean? The Most High is merciful, so allow him to work on that ground, and you just keep on casting the seed, keep casting the word out.
Exactly. Exactly.
But if we go to Matthew 6, and there's a little bit of feedback, so if you can mute, just a little bit of feedback here. I don't want to mute you because I know you want to talk, and I want to hear you talk too. Okay. All right. So when we look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, I still hear the feedback. Let's see.
Yeah, I don't hear you as well as I did before.
Okay. Can you mute and just see if that helps? Because I just hear a little bit of feedback. Like when I say something, I hear it repeated. Okay. All right. Let me see here. I'm just gonna mute. All right. Okay. Let's see. I think that sounds better. All right. So when we look at Matthew chapter 6. Ooh. Ah, how did it do all that? I'm just having problems, right? All right, when we look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, it says, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve Elohim and money." So in this case, he's talking about money, but we can look at the whole concept of serving two masters in this whole thorn type of a situation. Just like what Keturah said, these weeds, a lot of us have come from, worldviews, ideas. We might have personalities. We might have vices. We have all these different things that we kind of lived in and lived with before our encounter with the Most High, right? And so instead of getting rid of these things, some of us, and putting on the mind of Messiah and totally, crossing over, um, we keep those things there. We keep a special place in our heart for them. We don't totally cast them away. We keep them. We keep a special place there for them, right? And so, those are weeds in our situation, because even if we aren't actively serving those things, if we keep our hearts open to those things, that's just like having a weed that's taking up space in the ground, right? And I think that sometimes when we think about like problems and things that might come along, different types of adversity and things of that nature, we kind of get into this survival mode, right? Which causes us to take our focus off of the source of our deliverance and take our minds onto the things that we're looking for deliverance from. And so that could be problems, right? Anything that comes up in our life to maybe even a distraction. It could be a job, but it could be anything that is in your situation that's not what the Most High has for you. That those things can be thorns. Okay.
And so
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, to the point where you are depending on your paycheck to solve those problems rather than going to the Father and just praying and trusting that He's going to provide.
Yeah.
Then that I can relate to that, because I feel like, okay, if I can pay this, then I can pay that later, and then I'm depending on my next paycheck to do whatever else is needed. Or or how am I going to get the electric back on? Or I'm not asking for the Father to do it. I'm looking for a financial blessing from Yah, but I'm not asking him. I'm going to like people, or I'm looking at my paycheck, basically.
You're looking at what you can do for yourself.
Right. I'm trying to self-solve it.
Yep.
That's similar to like leaning on your own understanding.
Yes.
Because although, we are depending on this thing or this thing outside of the Most High, it's like we're essentially serving it and making it an idol. But I never saw that though, Carlotta, what you just said, like depending on your next paycheck to take care of a certain thing. I never saw that as serving two masters until now. I just thought of it as, I'm living, I'm surviving. Instead of asking the Most High to take care of, for me, something like a gas bill or my car insurance or something along those lines. I always saw it as a thing that I have to take care of. It's my duty, my job to take care of my household. I never saw it as taking those things to the Most High. I looked at other situations that were, I'll say, worthy enough to go to the Most High. Not something as small as not something as something like a light bill or car insurance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that if you think about it, you probably handled your problems before you had the Most High the same way. You was, you're looking for, we're going to get to talking about faith in the future in a couple of minutes, I should say, not in the real far future, but in a couple of minutes, we're going to look at faith, right? Because while we're stressing about things, Yah already handled it. If we was responsible, I should say, if we just totally did whatever we wanted to do, you know what I mean? But I'm saying that if we're on his side and we're following him and we're doing what he had for us to do, even when it looks like we're in the red, I remember my finances. I don't know how we survived, because if I wrote everything out on a piece of paper, we was in the red. But somehow our bills was always paid. Somehow we always have food. Somehow we survived, and I don't know how that even happened. If I sat there and tried to figure it out, I wasn't going to be able to figure it out. But we have made the Most High to be our master. And so we going to serve him, and we're going to do what he says. And even if that means that my husband can't take this job that seems like he should be taking, because it's going to have him do things like not be able to keep the holy days or work on Shabbat or whatever, we're going to just continue to keep him as our master, okay, and then watch what he's going to do in that situation. And so it's totally different, because if you keep that other master there, even if that master is yourself, you can't serve two masters. Same way with having that weed in the ground with that good seed. I mean, what sense does it make to keep a weed in the ground when you have good seed? It doesn't really make sense. Keeping that weed can cause us to forget our first love, going back into looking at Revelation 1. Keeping that seed in that ground can cause us to become lukewarm about the things of Yah. And I want to make it clear that this isn't about you not that seed can literally take root in you, but it's not the only thing growing in you. It's not the only thing that's there. And because of that, if we go back to the verse, if we go back up here, because of that, their fruit does not mature. Their fruit does not mature. So there can even be, little bulbs of fruit starting to grow, but it doesn't mature. It's not getting the full nutrients. It's not getting that full attention. I think about how even with the age of having cell phones and communication and stuff, how if I don't give my kids undivided attention, they're not going to feel like I care about them. Like I have to at least give them some undivided attention sometimes. I have to put my phone down if Moshe's coming and crying to me or something. If me and my husband don't have some undivided time to talk where I'm not distracted, right? Like we have to, that's how you build. So what the Most High wants from us is he wants it all. He don't want to share space with weeds. He wants his word to be fully implanted in us and not to be the only thing that's growing in us. So let's go here to ground 4. This is the 4th type of ground. Yeshua said, other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. So in Matthew 13:23, it says, as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, and one case 100-fold, and another 60, and in another 30. Luke 8 verse 15 says, as for that in the good soil, they are those who, hearing the word, hold it fast in an honest and good heart and bear fruit with patience. Okay, so when we're looking at this ground, this is the good ground. So this is the goal. If there's a goal here, we want to get to the point where we're the good ground, right? Because good ground produces spiritual fruit. And the reason that it does that is because the seed actually takes root and the ground was made ready. The weeds was pulled out. This ground produces a harvest. So it's not barren, it's not dead, it's living, and it's abundant. So this is the person who is truly reconciled to the Most High. They're truly convinced, and nothing is going to be able to shake them or take them away from their conviction and their belief in the Most High. All right, so there was someone trying to say something, because you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you would like to. Okay, so we go to if we go to 4:27, it says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. So when we're looking at this type of ground, and we want to talk about what do we build our faith on? Is our faith built on is it built on something that's not rooted, right? Is it built on sand, or is it built on a rock? A rock is something that's immovable, right? Immovable. So when we look at even that word hearing in the Hebrew, again, it's the word shema. which means to hear, but it has this understanding that it's hearing that causes obedience. It's hearing that's followed by obedience, right? So when we're talking about being this good ground, and when we hear this word, right? And remember, we said the word, the seed is the word, right? The seed is the word, right? So if we truly hear and we actually obey, and those words become implanted and embedded in us, then we'll be like this wise man who built his house on a rock, and nothing is going to cause that house to fall, right? But if that seed doesn't get implanted in us, if we don't do that word, and it's just like the words came into our ear and it passed through the other ear, that's going to be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. And we could also go to Romans chapter 8, where it speaks about this rooting process. You know, it says here, who shall separate us from the love of Messiah? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? And you know, these are things that when the sun comes up was scorching those plants that didn't have any root in the soil, right? These are even things that could be thorns that could cause somebody to stumble, right? It says, as it was written, for your sake, we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of Elohim and Yahshua HaMashiach, our Lord. So when we look at this whole thought of this seed being snatched from us, if that seed is rooted in you, nothing can come and snatch it up. Now, I think about my husband talked about when he was gardening, how roots go deep into the ground. They go very deep, and how sometimes it's hard to pull up things that are really rooted in the ground. So, you know, we had the woman who owned this house, and we've been living in this house for going on 12 years. We bought this house about 12 years ago, and she had perennial like flowers, like annual type flowers that come up every single year. And for 13 years, my husband has battled these flowers. And every year is a battle, and every year we have beautiful flowers, and they're growing amongst his his zucchinis, right? Because he don't want them to grow amongst his zucchinis, because he wants that ground to be focused on the zucchini or whatever he's trying to grow. And so when we look at things that are rooted, when things are really rooted in us, it's really hard to pull those things out, right? So we want to get rid of those carnal things that's rooted in us, those thorns, and we want to be rooted in the Messiah, because we don't want anything that's in all creation to be able to take that seed and pull that plant out of us, right? We really want to be rooted. And the other thing is that, you know, when we aren't fully rooted in him, there's something that can take us off track. There's something that can separate us. And that something is different probably for different people. What's able to take you off track might be different from what's able to take me off track. What could take a mother off track might be different from what could take a father off track. So, you know, we have to make sure that we're receiving his word and that we're being obedient to his word, so that we aren't here temporarily, so that we aren't just passers through, so that one day we don't find ourselves in a rejection type of a thing because there was something that happened to us that we couldn't take, that we literally couldn't accept or receive. Like, we need to be totally able to say whatever Yah says, I'm able to accept that, right? And if I don't understand it now, I'm just going to pray that he shows it to me by and by. You know, it's not, I don't got to understand everything, but I'm in this thing to win it. I'm in this thing forever. All right. So if anyone, I want to keep going with this, but if anyone wants to interject, you know, now is the time. You could go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to, and say anything you'd like to say.
To the separating, sometimes, you know, certain friendships, when you come into this faith, gets kind of challenged because you've probably had such a good relationship with a certain person. But if they're not going that same path that you're going, or even understanding, or even being respectful, it gets to the point where you're going to have to make that tough decision to then end in that relationship until they're willing to, you know, listen or maybe study or read with you.
Yeah. I think that sometimes we keep, I mean, a thorn can be a person, you know. That sounds mean, don't it? It sounds very mean to say a thorn can be a person, but a thorn really can be a person. A thorn can be any sort of attachment that is inordinate. It's not something that Yah wants for you to have. It's not something he wants for you to maintain. So, you know, it can be very challenging there. You know, I say all the time that for young people, especially, maybe I shouldn't just say young people, but I look at Joshua whenever he came down from the mountain, and how Moses, he put his tent outside the camp, and the cloud moved also outside of the camp because those people was just totally wicked, right? And Moses would go back to the people, you know, every day, but he left Joshua behind. And he doesn't explain. It says Joshua was a young man. That's what it says. Maybe that's why I say about this with the younger people, but it says Joshua was a young man, right? So for him to go back, that could have been a thorn to him. You know, that could have been something that took him down. But him staying behind and Moses going back and coming back and forth, he was able to maintain and then eventually be the successor of Moses. So when we talk about human relationships and human interactions and interpersonal relationships, you know, that is definitely a source of, or it can be a source of a thorn. You know, so we definitely need to make sure that we are, you know, we're not keeping those thorns in our soil.
Yeah,
All right.
I was gonna say, like, I see it as like when people ask me, I just say, like, you know, I just second guess. I mean, I just think more of what is in front of me now, like what trend is occurring that seems so cool that when you look deep into it, it's evil and it's wicked. But of course, society's making evil good, good evil. So like me personally, like when I'm going and approaching new surroundings and just getting back into the worldly things, now I can separate myself. It's just learning to separate yourself from those thorns because, like you said, it could be a person, but it could be new slang and talk and the way you dress. I mean, it's so much stuff, activities and just things. You're like, why is this okay? Like, why is people accepting this? But 10, 20 years ago, we would not be doing the same things we were doing now if it was back then. So just second guessing, just taking your self back and being like, okay, hold on. Like, is this like actually good for you? Or, I mean, most of the time it's not, but just knowing when to be able to excuse yourself from those worldly thorns.
I like how you said, excuse yourself. Like, you know, they're not, I mean, the thorn wants to stay. You know what I mean? A true thorn wants to stay in that ground, you know, and sometimes you got to excuse yourself from it and not expect that it's going to excuse itself from you, you know. Ema Sarah says here in the text, does everyone understand what an immature fruit looks like in real life? You want to know it when you see it, so that the word is real to you. It is very evident in Christian churches. It is when you have someone who has a calling begin to operate in that calling, but with a carnal taint. For instance, a pastor who is vain and dresses in the highest, most expensive fashion only. The singer who sings for applause and to be noticed, not for the glory of Yah. Another can be a teacher who cannot be taught and angrily argues the point that is obviously flawed. These individuals have immature fruit. It cannot be eaten. It can make you sick. It causes others to follow suit or fall away. Can you think of examples that you've noticed? And I mean, that is very true, because it can be anything that an immature fruit can be anything that is inordinate, anything that, you know, should be good, but it isn't good. Does anyone does anyone else have anything to say before we go on? Because we're going to look at spiritual fruit, okay? Because we're going to go back to Luke 13. I think we might have forgotten where we were at. Luke 13. Okay, Luke 13, verses 6 through 9, which is talking about that parable, right, of the fig tree. And he told this parable: a man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, "Look, for 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should it use up the ground?" Are you trying to say something? Oh, is that Tikva? Are you trying to say something? Okay. Tikva, it's okay. I really couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you better now. I couldn't hear you before though.
And when you get a moment, can you catch me up a little bit? Because I literally lost track of time, and if I want to text you, I missed everything.
Okay.
So just catch me up real quick if you can.
All right. All right. So, okay. So when we look at this parable, going back to Luke 13. All right, I'm going to start again at 6. And he told this parable: a man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, "Look, for 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should it use up the ground?" So basically, when I look at this, why should it use up the ground? I start to think about what we was talking about with the weeds, right? It's taking up space, right? It's taking up nutrients, right? And it's not even doing anything with those nutrients. It's not even doing anything. So why should it use up the ground? And he answered him, this is the vine dresser, "Sir, let it alone this year also until I dig around it and put on manure. Then if it should bear fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down." So we can see here that there's a tree, a fig tree that's been planted. And if you know anything about the Torah, which I'm not, this lesson doesn't really get into, is that you wait for 3 years for the tree to start bringing fruit. But in any case, 3 years have gone by since this tree has been planted, and there's no fruit. So there's two different solutions. The owner's solution is to cut down the tree. You know, it's taking up ground. Let's just cut the tree down, maybe plant a new tree. You know, maybe it was the seed, maybe the seed was bad, let's put a new seed in there. He doesn't really say what the next step is going to be, but the first step is to get rid of the tree. But the vine dresser solution, and this is the person who's looking at the garden and he's pruning it, and he wants to bring forth fruit for the owner. He says, how about this? Let's fortify the ground. He says, let's dig up around it. You know, let's put manure down, let's put fertilizer down, and let's wait another year, you know, give it another year, and let's see if it produces fruit. And if it doesn't produce fruit, you know, then we can go ahead and we can cut it down. So it says here that, you know, when I look at this, I think about how the vine dresser's solution, his solution isn't to hang up fruit on a tree. You know, I think sometimes, you know, if you want to save something, you might try to make it look good. You might try to shine it up, right? His solution isn't to put fruit on a tree or to glue it on a tree or to put string on the fruit and then to hang it up. And his solution isn't to destroy the tree either, but his solution is to fertilize that ground. Maybe something in the ground is hindering the growth of the tree. You know, maybe the problem is the ground and it's not the tree. So when I think about when we look at our lives, you know, when we look at our lives and we see things that's growing up in us that's not spiritual, we got to understand that the problem isn't the seed, because the seed, if we're talking about this parable that we was looking at with the Messiah, the seed is the word of the Most High. That's a good seed, right? If we aren't producing spiritual fruit, we got to look at the ground, right? Because carnal ground can't cultivate spiritual fruit. Carnal ground can't cultivate spiritual seed. I think about what if Sister or Ima Gabriel is still on the YouTube, giving her a shout out right here, because she says spiritual things for spiritual people, right? And so when we look at that, the verse she bases that off of is 1 Corinthians 2, verse 14, which says, the natural person does not accept the things of the spirit of Elohim, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned, right? So if I'm carnal, I can't understand or accept or receive. And you think about that receiving the things of the spirit, those things can't be planted in me because I'm carnal, I'm natural. I understand natural things. I understand things that make sense to my mind. I could understand philosophy. I could understand Plato. I could understand Aristotle. But then when I start to look at the scriptures, that's something I can't understand, right? Now, the things of the spirit or the things. I'm sorry. Who's saying something? Is that you, Tikva?
I can understand.
Okay, go ahead, Tikva.
Yeah, I don't know. I was saying that a natural person can only understand feel good. Like the natural thing, I feel good at once. That's what I understand.
I didn't get to hear what you said because it's kind of broken up. Are you able to text what you're saying so I can understand what you're saying? Hold on, I'm gonna see if you can text. Because I want to hear what you're saying. Okay, hopefully she's texting what she's saying, because I want to hear what you're saying. I want to respond to what you're saying, but it's so broken up that I really honestly can't understand what you're saying. Okay, she said natural people can only understand what makes them feel good. I mean, that's perfect. You know, that 100%. Um, you know, they're not able to understand anything that even remotely starts making them feel uncomfortable, you know? So when we're talking about receiving this seed, if we aren't ground that's able to understand or comprehend that seed, if we aren't allowing that thing to take root in us, then we can't fully expect to be able to bring forth a spiritual harvest. Okay. All right. So I almost feel like we can't leave from talking about this unless we look at the fruits of the spirit. I mean, it's almost impossible for us to even get off of this topic without talking about the fruits of the spirit. Because when we talk about the fruits of the spirit, it must be understood that, again, in that context of spiritual fruit can't come from carnal ground or from a carnal tree. So I think sometimes when, I think even whenever I was growing up and learning, hold on, I'm gonna text her. Okay. And Tikva, if you wanna, I have YouTube up on my phone, so if you wanna text into YouTube, you can do that as well. So whenever we think about spiritual fruit, and when I was thinking about spiritual fruit as a child, in Sunday school or whatever, it's like you kind of put the cart before the horse, right? You say, okay, I got this list. I need to be these things. But what follows? What comes first, the tree or the fruit? What comes first? Does the tree come first or does the fruit come first? Well, actually, that's the interesting question, because the fruit has the seed, which plants into the ground, which produces the tree, right? But for the sake of our conversation and our ground, right? See, I told you, I think about things a little bit too much. For the sake of our conversation, the tree grows up and then it bears fruit, right? And if I'm planting something in the ground, I start off with this seed, this word, it goes into the ground and it grows up into a tree in my ground. And then that tree, that spiritual tree, produces spiritual fruit, right? So if I'm thinking about the fruit and trying to exemplify the fruit in my life, and I don't have that tree that the fruit is coming from, then it's just like the vine dresser thing where I was saying, taking fruit and hanging it on the tree or gluing it to the tree or stapling it to the tree, right? And then it looks like fruit's coming from the tree, but that fruit isn't part of that tree. You know what I mean? That fruit, the tree might even, if we do it right, you could have that love, you could have that joy, you could have that peace and everything on the outside, because you know what that list says. And I'm going to make it look like I have all these fruits. And really, I don't have any of those fruits, right? They aren't really coming from that tree. They might be coming from even my desire to have the fruit. I want to have peace. I want to have love. I want to have this, but that's not coming from that spiritual tree. When we have that spiritual embedding tree, that fruit in our life, this comes from the spirit. It doesn't come from our minds. It doesn't come from what we're trying to accomplish, but it comes from that spirit working inside of us and through us, which is something that I already know Ema Sarah talks about a lot. And also, Ema Gabriel talks about it as well, that spiritual people produce spiritual fruit. Okay. So you can only fake having these fruits for so long, right? But as soon as a real situation comes, as soon as something really happens that knocks me off, now I done showed what it really was, right? I done showed I couldn't love through a situation. I done showed I couldn't have faith through a situation. Let's go here and let's look at this, okay? It says here, but I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. Again, you can't have these two things growing up together, right? You can't have two masters, right? For these are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things you want to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. So these things could be thorns, right? But it says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And those who belong to Messiah, Yeshua, have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. So talking about crucifying the flesh, it's just like pulling out that weed in that ground. You know, it's like pulling those weeds out, getting rid of those things, right? So that we can be this spiritual, ground that can cultivate this spiritual tree that can produce this spiritual fruit, right? So we have to put to death that old master. We have to put to death that old mentality. We got to put to death those old, we got to die. We literally got to crucify that, die to that flesh in order to walk in the Spirit. Because the fruit of the Spirit and the things of the Spirit exemplify the character of Yah. They exemplify the character of the Most High. And so Yeshua, he said, and we're going to read this verse later in Matthew 7, but he says that you know a tree by its fruit, right? And so if you have a tree and it's producing spiritual fruit, you know it's a spiritual tree. So let's just look at some of these things. We're not really going to go too deep in it because I don't want to make this too long. I almost feel like it's starting to go too long right now. I'm not sure where we're at on the time here, but I kind of want to keep it at about an hour, and I think we're over that now. But if we look at the fruit of the Spirit, love, you know, the greatest commandments, Yeshua says, is to love the Most High and to love your neighbor as yourself, right? He goes on to say his disciples will be known based off of their love one for another. He even says that when we love him, we'll keep his commandments and they're not going to be grievous to us, right? So when we love him, we'll willfully get rid of those weeds. We'll willfully be like, oh, you don't like that? Okay, I don't like it either. That's not something you want? Okay, I'm not going to do it. That's fine. You know what I mean? We'll keep his commandments and they won't be grievous to us. If we look at 1 Corinthians 13, I almost feel like I can't talk about certain things you can't talk about without going to certain verses, key verses. 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, right? Where it says love is patient and kind. And we're going to see that patience and kindness is part of the fruits of the Spirit, right? Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It's not arrogant. It's not rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. It endures all things. Love never ends. You know, it's something that it's not something that's here today and gone tomorrow. It says, as for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. We talk about joy. I think about the verse where it speaks in 1 Peter 1 verse 8. When you have time, read that later. But it talks about joy unspeakable and full of glory. This is something that we have in the Most High, in our confidence in him. James chapter 1, verses 2-4. I don't think I wrote it out anywhere, so I'm just going to read it because I mentioned it a couple of times in this section here. But James chapter 1, 2-4, it says, consider it all joy, or count it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. So counting it all joy, right? Things happen in our lives, and things that may not even seem like they should count joy or be added to joy in our life, we're able to count it all joy. When we talk about peace, we spoke about this Isaiah 26 verse 3 verse, which is perfect peace, or shalom, shalom, for those whose minds are stayed on Yah, right? Peace that surpasses understanding is in Philippians 4 verse 7. So when we have this peace, the shalom, shalom, it's not because we're leaning on our own understanding or leaning on our own resources, but we're leaning on the Most High. Patience. There's different forms of patience. But for this, I'm only going to talk about two. The first is bearing each other in patience with love, right? It has to be patience, but not just patience as intolerance, like I'm just going to tolerate you, but patience with love, right? That's Ephesians 4 verse 2. But also being patient with Yah, being patient with Yah to receive the hope and the promise that he has for us. And again, this testing and this trying and this working out of our faith in James 1 verses 2-4, it increases our patience. So patience is it's like an endurance type of a thing. I'm going to endure with my sister because I love her. I'm going to endure with people who may hurt me or just may not know any better because I have this love, right? But also being patient and waiting on the Most High for what he said he's going to do. Kindness. Kindness is one of the 13 attributes of divine mercy. The 13 attributes of divine mercy, if you go to Exodus chapter 34, verses 6-7, that's the character of Yah that he spoke over Moshe whenever he passed, whenever his glory, his kavod passed by him. But he says that he's abundant in mercy. One of the things, kindness, the Hebrew word is chesed, which means loving kindness. It can mean compassion. It can mean mercy. But in this verse here, and this is in the Greek, it means kindness, right? It's a loving response as opposed to an angry response, right? Some people can even have a hard heart towards themselves, right? In fact, if you don't have a compassionate heart towards yourself and towards others, it makes you unable to even put yourself in someone else's shoes, to be understanding and loving towards them. So kindness, this is something that the Most High says he's abundant in. Exodus 34 verses 6-7. We talk about goodness. Now this is important here because it's impossible to be good apart from Yah. Even the ruler comes up to Yeshua and says, good master. And Yeshua is like, well, why are you calling me good? Right? People literally think they're good people. They literally think the actions that they do can make them good. I can sit up here and say, oh, because I'm keeping a Shabbat right now, I'm good. No, that doesn't make me good, right? The only goodness that I have comes from the Most High. That's it, period. He is good, right? Our righteousness, in Isaiah 64 verse 6, it says that our righteousness is as filthy rags, right? As menstrual cloths. That's what our righteousness looks like before the Most High. There is no number of points you can get that adds up to deserving of salvation. I think about the one story where the person comes up to the gates of the kingdom and it's like, I didn't believe in the Messiah, but I saved a child from the fire. I did this, I did that. You know, I gave all my money to the poor. Okay, you get 5 points for giving your money to the poor. You get 2 points for rescuing the kids from the fire. You know what I mean? Okay, where are we at now? You know, you got like 10 points. Well, you need 1,000,000 points to get in. You know what I mean? Like, and then they say, well, how did this other person get in? Well, they didn't get in off of their good works. They got in off of the Messiah and what he did for them, right? So we got to look at goodness as being this fruit that comes forth from the Most High through us, okay? It's not our righteousness. It's not our goodness. When you think about faithfulness, you know, Hebrews 11, again, faith chapter. Faith is the confidence in things hoped for. It's the conviction of things that are not seen. So I don't see it, but I believe it, right? It says here, the testing of our faith works out our patience. That's the James scripture. James 1 verses 2 through 4. Hebrews 11 verse 6. And without faith, it's impossible to please him. For whoever would draw near to Elohim must believe that he exists and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him. So without faith, we don't have anything, right? We don't have anything. We got to trust in the Most High instead of trusting in ourselves. Gentleness. Galatians 5 verses 22 through 25. We're looking at gentleness here. And James 3 verse 17 says, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. So when we look at wisdom that comes from Yah, comes from above, there's gentleness in there, right? It's not abrasive. It's gentle. It's our disposition and our response to people and to situations. Okay. Now, this is the one I really wanted to get to. I was trying to kind of zoom through here, but self-control. Now, this fruit here is powerful. Proverbs 25 verse 28 says, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. I'm almost done. So a city that's broken into and left without walls. Okay. So why is this? You know, when there's no walls, there's no boundaries. A person who doesn't have self-control doesn't have any boundaries, right? And we know that the Most High is all about boundaries. He's all about structure. This is why we have the Torah that we live by. We have rules, we have definitions. You know, he's not about chaos and confusion. And so he's definitely not about us just yielding to the whims of our carnal nature. 1 Corinthians 9 verses 24 to 27 says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. So just think about that. As is that thing truly rooted in you, right? The person who's disqualified is not rooted in them. But self-control is what produces that endurance to make it to the end. And you think about like an athlete, you know, they have to exercise great self-control, what they eat, how they practice. So many different things go into whether or not they're going to win the prize, right? All right, let's go here. Go see about Momo Africa. 2 Timothy 1 verses 6 through 7 says, for this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift of Elohim, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. For Elohim gave us not a spirit of fear, but of power and love and self-control. So when we talk about this spiritual fruit, right? What did he give us? You know, he gave us this spirit of power. And really, self-control it takes spiritual strength. Okay, it takes spiritual strength to say no to our ego. Something that Keturah's baby just came out, and he knows he's hungry, right? And when his diaper needs to be changed, he knows his diaper needs to be changed, right? So we have this thought, just even from birth of our needs and the things that we need, and there's nothing. Go over there. I'm almost done. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it, but we have to, as when we come into maturity, learn how to hold ourselves and our desires and the things that we want back, right? Not to ignore the things that we need, but to operate in self-control, okay? To temper our reactions with love, right? To think about others before we think about ourselves. To remain faithful even when a situation doesn't meet our logical conclusions, okay? So I want to go back to what Yeshua said before we end it. But what Yeshua said in Matthew 7, he's talking about prophets here, but we can glean about the tree producing fruit, different types of fruit from this lesson he gives, because he says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Or grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruits. Now, again, this is talking about in the context of prophets coming, and bringing forth these wrong messages. But you can see here that every tree, you know a tree by its fruit. Okay, you know what a tree is. I know a fig tree because it produces figs. I know an apple tree because it produces apples. Okay. So if we're not walking in, if we can look at our trees, we can look at our plants, and we're not walking in these fruits of the Spirit. Okay, we're not walking in, we're not exemplifying the fruit of Yah in our lives. We need to look at the ground. We need to look at ourselves, right? And fortify the ground, fortify our lives, right? Fortify our walk, fortify our faith, fortify our purpose, right? So that the word of Yah is the only thing that's taking root in us. And when we look at this parable, with these prophets, it's just time to cut that tree down and throw it in the fire. These people are literally leading these people in a wrong direction. But if you look at even going back to the owner and the vine dresser, my kids are like starting to go a little bit. I think I've passed the time frame that I can talk without, making sure they're okay. But when you look at the owner and the vine dresser, and the owner was like, look, this tree is taking up root. I mean, it's taking up ground. We need to get rid of this tree. And the vine dresser is like, okay, let me just dig around the tree and fortify the ground. And let's just give it another year, right? He's not giving it another 10 years. He's not giving it an eternity. He's giving it another year, right? So we have to have this mindset about us, because we're all here. We're all listening to this message. This is a seed, right? We have to have this urgency mindset about us. If we're good ground, we're going to have that urgency mindset about us, right? Because we don't want that seed to be on the top, and we don't want it to be choked out by the sun, and we don't want it to be choked out by thorns. We want to be rooted, right? And we want to produce fruit, because it's not enough just to have this tree grow up. If the tree grows up and the fruit doesn't mature, that's the same as the thorn ground. But we want to have fruit and we want to bring forth a harvest, right? James 1 verse 21 says, therefore put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your soul. The word that sits on the top isn't going to save your soul. The word that you receive, the word that takes root in you, the word that you will, with patience and self-control, run this race, right? All the way till the end. That's the word that's going to save your soul. That's the seed that's going to produce a spiritual tree, spiritual fruit, and save your soul, which is where I wanted to get to with the spiritual elevation. You know, that whole saving of your soul concept of being able to commune, right, with the Almighty. So, you know, that's kind of what I wanted. I mean, I think that's what I wanted to talk about today. There's only a few notes that we didn't really get to, but I want to open it up for discussion. Anyone who wants to say anything before we totally close it down.
Yes, Teresa, I like you were saying, really walking this walk, living this life, serving the Creator. You really got to lay everything down that you think you know and allow Him to work your soil. Allow Him to work the soil and add all the nutrients that you need so the seed can take root and grow into a fruitful tree and grow into that fruitful grapevine. So you really got to lay yourself down and lay everything that you know down, because our own thoughts get us in trouble all the time. It's just like a house. You have a house that needs to be redone over. You have to gut it out. You have to tear down the walls and start over. You have to take it down to the studs and start all over. But when you start over the new house, putting up the new walls, securing the foundation, you put it up with the Creator. You allow Him to instruct you where each and every little thing goes. So now your house will stand strong and nothing will come shake it and tear it down. So you're so on point. This is a beautiful lesson today. I'm glad that I was able to be here.
Hallelujah. That was beautiful.
I wanted to add, hallelujah, Naomi. I wanted to add, just continue to be mindful of the things that the seeds and stuff that you are feeding your spirit, making sure that you are feeding, this is myself, just continuing to keep that same momentum and feeding my spirit properly, making sure that I'm watering it with the proper things to make sure that it is growing to the, to the best capability as it's supposed to, and to the Most High.
Hallelujah. I just wanted to add that this was such a great word. It was so on point, sis. Thank you. I'm so happy I was able to tune in. I'm so happy I didn't miss any bit of it. Oh my, it was so on point. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
You gonna rub it in that you ain't missed nothing? I missed the whole hour.
Oh, sis, I promise you, I was not rubbing it in, sis. I just mean, like, I really needed this. Like, this was so on point for just the day-to-day journey, and it was just amazing.
I just want to say, I thank the Most High for allowing me to catch today's lesson. I'm glad that this option was available. Whether it was tone, teaching, or you, I'm just thankful I was able to be here, catch the word, because I needed it. That was just reassurance for me, and I'm sure many others online today. I thank y'all for your insight, your point of views, and your love and support overall.
Can everybody hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to talk to say like how she was talking about each ground level, about how we should all be patient with each other, depending on which level we're on. Somebody might be on level 1 and you may be on ground 2, right? So just exercise the patience and love that we should have for one another. This was all in all just a good lesson. Particularly what I caught from it is just self-control. You know, just having that self-control. You know, you sometimes you're not understanding how what you can say to affect someone else. You know, you just all ignorant and naive to your own self sometimes, and just being just loose with yourself, not even understanding how you're affecting the individual next to you. So all in all, I caught the self-control of it, you know, the discipline, and how you just being, you know, more cautious about what you're doing to affect someone else. And even if you are, so to speak, so just I could just throw a ground out there. I may be, not to say that I am, I could be on ground 3, but not understand that I still display characteristics of ground one, right? Where I just don't, I have it together here, but not there. And then in other areas where somebody may try to tell me like, hey, you still possessing these all fruits, and not want to receive it because I feel like I'm maybe just this and that, and I'm just so far off into it to where I just know I'm just righteous, right? So we have to be like more mindful of ourselves and understanding that, you know, go through the fruits. When I took it, I was like, as she was breaking down each fruit, I saw things in there where I was like, I saw good qualities and I saw some bad. And I was like, this why I was like, it was like a good lesson because she broke down each fruit. And although you may be on ground 4, just throwing it out there, not to say is that's where I am, but that's where anybody else is. You may still possess some fruits of ground 1, like where you just off in your spirit and not knowing that, like Satan can jump on all of us, you know, how he entered into Judas, he can enter into all of us. So we just have to be mindful that when these times come, how we affect the person next to us, and just accept the correction. This was a very good class, sis, and I appreciate you for it.
All right. Does anyone else have anything they want to say? You know, I don't know. I don't think. Ema Sarah is still on. So if you wanted to put something in there, you can. If anyone else has anything they want to say, you know, we'll just give you another opportunity, and then we'll shut it down. Okay, so all right, so let me see here. I think I'm just gonna end it then, because my kids are really like not they're ready for some individual attention. Remember we talked about that. They're ready for me to pay them some attention. So y'all bless everyone, and you know, we will do this again, right? Y'all willing. So y'all bless.
Y'all bless, sisters.
Yeah,
God bless.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Oh.